It's time for another episode of the Recalcitrant DBA. This time we're going to get into the group by clause. We took a quick detour last time to talk about aggregate functions because they play an integral part in group by clauses. So first, let's talk about what a group by does. Sometimes you want a list of things arranged by something they have in common. For example, all customers per city, incidents by severity, crimes per bureau, something like that. And then usually we want some kind of aggregated info about each group. For instance, all customers per city and how many there are, incidents by severity and the average response time, or maybe crimes per bureau and the total dollar amount of damage. The words per and by usually indicate the need for a group by. So let's take a look at how they work. Let's go back to a familiar table, production.product. In this case, I select a few columns with no where clause, execute it, and it returns 504 rows. But I want to group those rows by this product subcategory ID. So I just add this line to it, and I group by product subcategory ID. But when I execute this, I get an error. When you do a group by, there are limits on what can be listed in the select clause. Roughly speaking, you're limited to the column you group by, in this case product subcategory ID, and one or more aggregate functions. So let's change the code to look like this. Notice that this returns only 38 rows. That tells me that there are 38 unique or distinct values in the product subcategory ID column. You can confirm that, by the way, by using the distinct function. Just like this, select distinct, and I execute it. It returns the 38 rows. The distinct tells SQL to return only the values that are unique. So looking at our original code, the group by instructed the server to group all of the records that had the same product subcategory ID into a group and then average the list price for each group. Execute this again. And so for product ID or product subcategory ID number 7, the average list price is $20.24. Notice it didn't tell us how many records were grouped into each group, but we can get that by adding a count as part of our code. When I execute that, it tells me not only the list price, the average list price, but how many there are in each group. Now, as long as we're doing this, we might as well make it look nice. Those first two columns probably ought to come after product subcategory ID. That ought to be listed first, and we probably ought to alias these things. So let's fancy it up a little bit and make our code look like this. The same values, but it looks a little nicer. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere. We can now see the average price of the items per subcategory, and we can see how many products in each subcategory. But we have a lot of nulls we should get rid of. Sounds like a good use of a where clause. If I add a where clause, and I filter out the nulls using a does not equal null, first of all, I need to add that where clause before the group by statement. But it looks like this. But something went wrong. We aren't getting any results. Well, remember when we talked about nulls in the last video, I said that SQL ignores nulls. When you try to compare anything to a null, it returns an unknown, which equates to a does not match kind of answer. So no records are returned. In order to look for nulls, we use a different kind of command. We test for the condition of nullness. So we should write our query like this. You can use is null or is not null to test for the existence or the non-existence of a null, because we're testing for not equality, but the condition of being null. Let's execute this. And now notice that instead of our 400 and whatever rows, we're only getting back 38 rows when we grouped it by. And now since we've filtered out the nulls, we're only getting 37 rows back. It ignored all the null values and didn't create a group for them. Okay, now for some homework. As usual, I have a straightforward and a challenge part. For the straightforward practice, I want you to refine this query to include the minimum and maximum price for the products in each category. Remember the aggregate functions min and max. You should be able to do that with what you already know. But now for the challenge. I want you to query the human resources.employee table and return the total vacation hours, total sick leave hours, and the total number of employees per job title for the hourly employees. Now think about the language I just used there. The total of this and the total of that per job title for the hourly employees. That per job title indicates a grouping, a group by. And that for the hourly employees indicates a where clause, or at least it should. So go ahead and work on that. Enjoy it, and in the next video we'll talk about some different ways you could have done that. You might come up with a way that's different than mine, but we'll see how it goes. Between now and then, be good and write good code. Thanks for watching Recalcitrant DBA. And don't forget to subscribe and get notifications and all that stuff that I always tell you. Thanks.